hope for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? How you doing? Today's Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. 32 days into the new year. Only 333 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a total undisclosed location. But it is beautiful in here. I say it every night because it is beautiful in here. I want to believe, staring at me. Yeah. How you doing? I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer, and UNX Networks. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? I'm in the middle of a countdown. Today is Tuesday. Conscious Life Expo is this weekend. So I have shifted things up. I am going to do Fader Night tomorrow night. Fader Night tomorrow night. Okay, taking Thursday off. I have to. It's a logistical thing. I could probably pull it off like I've done the last couple of years, but you know what? It's just too much stress. Rolling into the Hilton at midnight and setting up the booth after the show and all of that, and then turning around and getting up early in the morning and started with no sleep. You know what? No, I need to just take the stress out of it. I need to take the stress out, and you're going to help me do that by having Fader Night tomorrow night. We can just relax and get her done. So that's what we're going to do. So Fader Night is tomorrow night, and we'll modify the website. I'm announcing it now, and we'll do some stuff on social media tomorrow. Okay, so Fader Night tomorrow night, kids. Tonight, very special first-time guest. 2 first-time guests this week. I love it when that happens. When that works out tonight. Marco Vigato joins us live from Mexico City. He's from Italy, lives in Mexico City now. So live from Mexico City, we are going to discuss his excellent new book. It's called The Empires of Atlantis. I have it. It's a great read. We will be going through all of that tonight. It may not be what you think either. But then again, it just might be. And he's done a lot of research into this. It's going to be a great conversation tonight. He's got a great accent, too, as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. Marco is with us. Tomorrow night is Fader Night. Open lines all night long. Thursday, I'm on the road. Thursday, I am on the road. If you are going to the Conscious Life Expo, I will see everybody there. I will be there Thursday. And I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think I'm going to spend the night Sunday night, too. So I'm going to roll back on Monday morning. All right, so that's it, man. We're going to have some good times coming up. The countdown has started. I'm excited. It's already Tuesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and then that's it. And then boom, Conscious Life Expo. So there you go. I'm going to say this out loud. Chrissy Newton on the show last night. That was an amazing conversation. She's so good and so smart. But Chrissy's going to be at the Conscious Life Expo. I mean, at least Friday. Maybe she'll stay for the whole weekend. But, yeah, come and meet Chrissy. Chrissy's going to be hanging out. I spoke to Rudy Sarzo earlier today. He cannot make the Conscious Life Expo. He's at home babysitting. He's got to babysit this weekend. And I was like, man, I totally get it. But the next event coming up for me is right here in Los Angeles, too, is Disclosure Fest. And that is going down in June. And everything is just got solidified with that. That is a huge event in downtown L.A., but Rudy's going to make it to that. So, okay, anyway. Yeah, Disclosure Fest. Yeah, we haven't talked about that in a minute, have we? Because of this pandemic thing. But Disclosure Fest is going down. It's going down in June at the Los Angeles Historic Park, right there downtown next to Chinatown. It's a big event, man. That's a lot of fun. Okay, so anyway, Conscious Life Expo this weekend. There may be a chance that I am going to be out in Sedona in a couple of weeks as well. I will keep everybody posted. And then there is another trip tentatively scheduled for March, also out in Sedona too. But I'm going to keep everybody posted. I was speaking to, I'll just tell you, speaking to Emily Harrison today. She's got an event going on out there in a couple of weeks, a week after Conscious Life Expo. And the invitation is there. So I think I'm going to, if things work out, I may be in Sedona in a couple of weeks. Okay? All right. And just when you thought everything was slowing down, right? Well, no. Vacation's over. It's time to get back to the reality of life. Oh, yes. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The Sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter. Any questions or comments during the show? Hashtag F2BQ. Everything is live up in front of me. Happy Taco Tuesday. Is it Taco Tuesday? Man, you know what I was doing tonight? I was going to do chicken Alfredo with spinach and ricotta ravioli. That was my plan. Janine, you just altered my plan. It's Taco Tuesday. Oh, man. Let's get to the breaking news. Lots of it. Yesterday, NASA posted this on their website, and I quote, Caltech astronomers Konstantin Batyanjin and Mike Brown announced new research that provides evidence of a giant planet tracing an unusual elongated orbit in the outer solar system. The prediction is based on detailed mathematical modeling and computer simulations, not direct observation. This large object could explain the unique orbits of at least 5 smaller objects discovered in the distant Kuiper Belt. And then there was this from Director of NASA's Planetary Science Division, Jim Green. Quote, the possibility of a new planet is certainly exciting, and it's exciting for me as a planetary scientist and for all of us. This is not, however, the detection or discovery of a new planet. It's too early to say with certainty that there is a planet X. What we are seeing is an early prediction based on modeling from limited observation. It's the start of a process that could lead to an exciting result. End quote. Holy crap. From NASA's website. Mike Brown's been doing this for a very long time. Looks like we're on the verge of something. Otherwise, they wouldn't make the announcement. All right, hackers. Back in the news. Hackers have stolen cryptocurrency worth $80 million from Qubit Finance, a decentralized finance platform, and the company is now begging hackers to return the stolen Dash. The company contacted the hacker and offered them the maximum bug bounty in exchange for a return of the funds. Qubit Finance acknowledged the hack and said in a tweet on Friday that the hackers minted unlimited explosive Ethereum, otherwise known as XETH, to borrow money on Binance Smart Chain. The value of the cryptocurrency stolen makes this the largest hack of 2022 to date. Wow. Flowers. Jurassic Park. Here we go. Flowers discovered perfectly preserved in globs of amber bloomed at the feet of dinosaurs, suggesting that some flowering plants in South Africa today have remained unchanged for 99 million years. Flowers bloom, they transform into fruit, and then they disappear. So ancient flowers aren't well represented in the fossil record, making these ancient blooms and the history that they carry with them extremely important. All of this according to a study, the study author Robert Spicer, a professor in the School of Environment, Earth, and Ecosystem Sciences at the Open University in the United Kingdom. The images are amazing. A pair of same-sex penguins. Okay, here we go. Here we go. You ready? A pair of same-sex penguins hatched their first chick at Rosamond Gifford Zoo in New York, and they are now the proud parents of a baby penguin, caring for it like professionals. The two male Humboldt penguins, named Elmer and Lima, were given an egg to incubate because the egg's biological parents have a history of breaking them. So, a chick hatched from the egg on January 1st and is doing great with its same-sex parents. They are keeping the newborn penguin warm and fed. There you go. Let's get this show cracking. Happy birthday to today, Lisa Marie Presley. 53 years old. Happy birthday, Lisa Marie. Michael C. Hall today is 50. I loved him in 6 Feet Under and the first season of Dexter. Not the second series, the first season of the first series. That was the best one. Heartbreakers guitarist Mike Campbell today is 72. Our dead guy's birthday today is Rick James. That's right. 1948 to 2004, died at the age of 54. Rick released his solo record, Come Get It, in 1978 with those two hits, You and I and Mary Jane. Then in 1981, it all broke loose. He released Street Songs. The entire album, all 8 songs, both sides, hits. I mean, just give it to me, baby, right? Super Freak. Temptation Sing, you know what I'm talking about. Rick also had a successful solo career as a songwriter and producer for Tina Marie, the Mary Jane Girls, the Temptations, Eddie Murphy, and Smokey Robinson. Incredible. I'm not going to do it. I almost did some Dave Chappelle. I'm not going to do it. On the morning of August 6, 2004, his caretaker found him dead of a heart failure in his Los Angeles home at the Oakwood Toluca Hills apartment complex just outside of Burbank, California. He was just 56 years old. Happy birthday, Rick James. That's what I'm talking about. Let's see. Okay, all right. Where am I at? On this day in history. OTD 2003. Saw it live. I did. The space shuttle Columbia breaks up while entering the atmosphere over Texas. killing all 7 crew members on board. Yeah. Got up early, was watching it. Who was the science guy for CNN? I can see his face. And he's doing the report, and there it was. Incredible. Fader fact. That's not a Mandela effect. That definitely happened in 2003. Fader fact. KGB secret agent Gennady Vasilenko and CIA agent Jack Platt became friends while trying to recruit each other to the other side. That's right. They knew the other was a spy. They knew this and decided to call a truce because they became best friends and they wanted it to stay that way. True story. Look it up. It's incredible. It's a love story. It's a love story. Tonight, very special guest, Marco Vigato is here. For the first time, we're going to be discussing his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. Tomorrow night, no longer a TBA. Tomorrow night is Fader night with open lines all night long. I'm taking Thursday off. All right. River Moon Coffee. RiverMoonWellness.com. Fade to Black Blend. Best coffee in the world. Get yourself some. Go right now. Go to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Click on the banners. Go to RiverMoonWellness.com. Jimmy Church. Right there. We got a whole page of stuff. Oh, man. Whew. It's the best coffee in the world. This is the deal. You're going to do what I do. You're going to go, oh, man. That's what you're going to do. You want to experience that. Best coffee in the world. All right. So, did you watch Ken Priest? Did you watch Ken Priest last night? Ken Priest, man, I can't keep up with you, man. I can't keep up. Hey, Ken, you coming out to Conscious Life Expo? Tell me you are. Tell me you are, man. I got to hang out with you for the weekend. Please, Ken Priest. All right. Lisa's going to be there. All the Fadernauts are going to be there, Ken. All right. So, did you watch Arrival last night after the show? I didn't. No, I didn't. I know I told everybody to do it. I mean, I had it all queued up and ready to go. It was right there. I had my munchies on. I was good to go. I had, do I want to disclose? I had some really good cookies. I had popcorn. I had bubbly, sparkling watermelon water. I was good to go. But then, right below it, and you know how it is, where you get the viewers also watched, right? You know the drill. And then sitting right there was Interstellar. Yeah, I clicked. I did. I was ready for Arrival. But I watched Interstellar. And here's the deal. I'm in the middle of Kip Thorne's The Science of Interstellar for like the 5th read. And the book was initially published in 2014. It's Kip's second book for non-scientists like myself after his first book, Black Holes and Time Warps, which was released all the way back in 1994. The Science of Interstellar is a follow-up text for the movie Interstellar. And it explains all of the science used in the film. Wormholes, time travel, black holes, so much more. And it's truly a must-read for anyone into the subject, and, even more so if you've seen the film. Watch the film, read the book. Watch the film, read the book. Watch the film, read the book. That's what I've been doing, right? Okay. There's no reason to discuss the film here and now. I'm not going to do that. Last night, I ended up getting all caught up in the time aspects and not the science of it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the emotional drama that is caused from a few extra minutes out there and what it means back home, wherever that may be. And this whole thing got me thinking. I mean, sure, we've all thought about being an astronaut. We all know that, and we've definitely considered jumping into a time machine, right? Look, going to the moon and back is like a 1-week trip. No biggie. Mars, okay, a little more to consider there, but jumping into a wormhole and skimming the edge of a black hole or two would mean that everything you are leaving here on Earth, that's family, friends, your life, will not be here when you get back. If you get back. It's deep. I mean, say you're out with your family. Okay, this is the Twisted Jimmy. This is the Twisted Jimmy part. This is where Twisted Jimmy comes in. Say you're out with your family in your Starship station wagon, right? Okay. And you're cruising around in your Starship station wagon. You got the wood on the side. And you're checking out a black hole with the family. You're looking out the windows, Robinson's style. And then you decide to jump in your little scout vehicle that you got parked in the back, and you jump in and you go for a cruise to see what you can see. You come back 20 minutes later, and your 5-year-old daughter is now 60. Your wife died 40 years before that. And your daughter's upset. Where have you been? Obviously. And the only thing you can say is, honey, I was only gone for like 15 minutes. Right? Think about it. And Kip Thorne lays it out beautifully in his book. It's these little moments, a minute here, 5 minutes there. Well, they all add up. And Matthew McConaughey's Cooper starts to realize this very early on in his journey, right, to save mankind. There's no way he's going to make it back to see his family alive. Yeah, it's deep. I get that. And the science fiction in the film is top-notch for sure, but it's his daughter Murphy that rips at you, which brings me to this. If you're going to go, right, if you are going to get out there and mess with time, you'd better hang out for an extra 5 minutes or 5 years, right? You're probably going to want to get back here a few thousand years in the future, right? You're going to want to come back to a completely different world from the one that you left. That's right. You want to bypass all of the heartbreak, all of the emotion. You just need to get all of that out of the way to know that everything changed thousands of years before. You don't want to come back and see the remnants of your life. You don't want to do that. And the other part is this. You don't have to worry about making promises to your kids, right? Don't worry, baby. I'll be back in 5. It's not that big of a deal. I'll be right back. Seriously, you don't want to deal with that. I got so wrapped up into that last night, thinking, what would I do? What would I do? Do you really? She doesn't want you to go, right? Nobody wants you to go. They know you're not coming back, and you're going to make those empty promises. You don't want to do that. At least go, you know what, honey? Let's have one last dinner. I'm not coming back. I got to go save the world. She can deal with that. You don't want her waiting at the front window, looking for your car to pull back up in the driveway. Daddy's home. No. You want to come back thousands of years in the future. And that's how I resolved it last night. Instead of watching Arrival, which I'm going to do tonight after the show. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. It's going to be a great show tonight. We have Marco Vigato here. He's live down in Mexico City. He's going to join us in a couple of minutes because we're going to discuss his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. It is a great read. I've got it. The links are up, not only in the show description below, but over on our website and throughout social media. go and check out the book. It's a great read. Tomorrow night is no longer a TBA. Tomorrow night is Fader night with open lines all night long. All right. Thursday night, I'm taking off, folks. Okay? All right. You've been warned. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer and UNX Networks. Raise Hobbs. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back after this short break with our guest, Marco Vigato. Stay with me.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net.
Introducing the Game Changer blend from River Moon Coffee that delivers a customized blend made specifically for the Fadernauts. If the game is rigged, change the game. It's a bolder cup with some bite. Game Changer is the coffee of choice for those that prefer an organic dark roast that is slightly lighter and milder, but it's still dark. With wild notes of pecans and chocolate with a rich, balanced, full-bodied cup that is roasted to perfection for a great coffee to start your day, as an after-dinner coffee or anywhere in between. Artisan, small batch roasted to perfection. USDA certified organic, all River Moon coffee is freshly roasted and packaged in the USA. Just go to rivermooncoffee.com or click on the banners over on our site and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. rivermooncoffee.com.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. Getthetea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's getthetea.com. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
The new KUNXDB, the UNX Network, bringing you the best in paranormal programming in premium high-definition streaming audio and video. Log on to the network at unxnetwork.com and check out the growing lineup of programs, including Jimmy Church, Whitley Strieber, Micah Hanks, and many more. Sign up for the free UNX newsletter, follow the UNX blog, or pick up the latest edition of the UNX magazine. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So check us out at unxnetwork.com. Tap the show page and the calendar so you never miss your favorite live shows and podcasts. We are your portal for all things paranormal. The X, explaining the unexplained.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show. on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Manson. You're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Marco Vigato is with us. We're going to be discussing his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. Tomorrow night, Fader night, open lines all night long. I'm taking Thursday off, heading down to the Conscious Life Expo. I'll be hosting all weekend. I'll see everybody down there. It's going to be great at the LAX Hilton. Links for that are down below and throughout social media. Tonight, it's all about Marco. He's an Italian-born author, researcher, and explorer who has dedicated the last 15 years to uncovering the truth about the origins of civilization. Educated at Harvard and Milan's Bocconi University, he lives now in Mexico City. He is the author of Empires of Atlantis, published by Inner Traditions, and has appeared on numerous documentaries, podcasts, and TV shows as an expert in ancient Mesoamerica and the worldwide megalithic phenomenon. 2020, he founded the ARX Project with the objective of uncovering more evidence of what he believes was once a global seafaring culture that vanished at the end of the last ice age. His website and links are right there in our website, marcovigato.com. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Marco Vigato. Marco, good evening, man, from Mexico City.
Good evening, Jimmy.
How are you, man? And this is the deal. You get the first-time guest disclaimer, Marco, so let's get that out of the way. Marco, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. There you go. You ready?
Perfect. It's a pleasure to be here on the show with you, Jimmy.
Yeah, and man, and I'm going to let the audience know we've been working on this for a while now. Finally, we've got you here, and you've got to love technology. Forget about ancient technology with ancient civilizations. We have got this dialed, and you're live from Mexico City. Now, you're originally from Italy, and before we jump into the book, tell me about that. Where did you grow up?
Yes, you're right. I'm originally from Italy, from Milan, to be precise. So I spent most of my childhood really traveling throughout Italy, throughout Europe, North Africa, Asia. I've been a very eager traveler and explorer since a very early age. Also helped by my family background. My father is also an archaeologist. And so I've been from very early on excavations and archaeological sites. And just about 5 years ago, I then decided to move to Mexico, where I'm continuing my studies and my research here in ancient Mesoamerica.
Your dad was an archaeologist.
Yes,
now,
yes, he's an archaeologist.
How cool is that? What type of archaeology and what kind of excavations were you guys going on?
It's mostly classical archaeology, so visiting lots of Roman sites throughout Italy, throughout the Mediterranean. So not exactly the same kind of research that they do. But I think at least he definitely instilled in me the curiosity and the passion for the ancient past.
So wait a minute. You grew up at archaeological digs at ancient Roman sites with your dad?
Yes, that's correct.
That's amazing. I mean, wow. Okay, did you? Okay, hold on a minute. I wanted to talk about you. Let's talk about your dad. How did he feel about the ancient past? Is he inside the box, or does he think outside of the box?
Well, I would say he tends to keep a more balanced view. We have a very, very animated discussions about the subject of ancient civilizations. I would say he's very open to considering the evidence for that. I think throughout the years, he has become increasingly convinced of that possibility, even though he will probably not admit it to his more academically minded colleagues.
Did you ever, oh man, you've got questions about megalithic sites and our lost history. what did you ask your dad about this? Did you go at him about the pyramids or Stonehenge or any of the other sites around the world?
Yes, as well. I actually had the pleasure of visiting many of these sites with my dad, which was, of course, very interesting to get the opinion of actually a trained archaeologist. And there are a number of these places that left him entirely speechless. So when I talk about some of the megaliths of Egypt, of South America, sites like Tiwanaku, there is just no logical explanation for these sites.
So, and he's got an open mind about that.
Yes, very open.
Let's before we get to Atlantis, we're going to be talking about Egypt quite a bit tonight too, as well, of course. What did he have an opinion on? A site like Giza, which we still don't have the answers to. Today, does he think it's conventional that hey, they just managed to get it done, or that there was something else? And what about the age of Giza? Did he have any opinions on that?
Well, it's interesting because even going to a site as Giza, you very often just see what you want to see. And what I mean is that if you go there with a preconceived view, that what you are going to see is just a huge necropolis, a city of the dead, or some pharaoh's tomb, that's what you're going to see. And so it was pretty eye-opening for him as well to get to see some of the evidence of ancient technology you find at the site. Some of these machine stones that clearly show what look like sow marks, for instance, or the evidence of high-speed drilling. These are not the usual things that the casual tourist to the site would see. But when you're confronted with that type of evidence, that really opens up your mind to other possibilities about the use and the purpose of the site.
Well, you're right about that, because you are going to see what you're going to see. Right, and if you do your reading and you have a certain mindset, you're going to go and see what you're going to see. But if you are a trained professional archaeologist, you're also trained to see certain things, and you see something that is completely out of place. That is going to, raise more questions than answers for somebody like your father. And you are already outside of the box, right? So
Absolutely.
Right? So the two of you are seeing what you want to see, but you're seeing it together. That must have been incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. There are actually also limits to an archaeologist's formation and training. So, for instance, there are some aspects of my research that have to do with astronomy, for instance, in which he is not familiar at all. He actually learned a lot through these research astronomical alignments. It's not just part of the traditional archaeologist's toolkit. So, at the end of the day, what you realize is that the study of the past is very multidisciplinary research. So it involves a number of different disciplines. No one can be an expert at all of them. It involves archaeology, but it also involves geology, astronomy, genetics, even more recently. So it's a whole range of disciplines that you need to know about.
Now, one more thing about your dad, and it all applies to this conversation, of course, and then we'll move on. In that, going through Italy, which has all of that history, all of those fabulous monuments and colosseums everywhere, and these different temples and sites, of course, we know about this, and your father is aware of that. But he's also aware that Giza happened 2,000 years before Rome ever laid a brick, right? 2,000 years. What did he have to say about that, about the technology and the knowledge that the Egyptians had 2,000 years before Rome was a city?
Well, it is quite incredible if you think about the depths of time. And even more, I had the pleasure also of visiting Gobekli Tepe, this incredible megalithic site in Turkey with my dad. And in that case, we're talking about a site that is probably 11,000 years old, or even more, 12,000 years old. And so you're literally talking about a place that is thousands and thousands of years older than Rome and has a sophisticated megalithic architecture. And so it makes you wonder how sophisticated these early civilizations were already thousands of years ago, and where that culture, that civilization came from.
And it's the same thing that applies to Giza. Certainly, applies to Gobekli Tepe, you just got to add 7,000 years, right? And that's a crazy thought. And for your dad, as an archaeologist, and you, of course, these are things that weren't supposed to exist. Gobekli Tepe was not supposed to exist. That everything started in ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia, and in Egypt at 3000 BC. That's it. Nothing to see here. We're moving on. And then Gobekli Tepe pops up, and it's built 7,000 years before Giza. And it is just as elegant, isn't it? When you first saw Gobekli Tepe for the first time, what went through your mind?
It's just incredible, the scale of the site, the complexity of the decoration, these massive stone pillars. Is something that you definitely would not expect at such an early time in human history. This is something you could compare, for instance, to the Bronze Age civilizations, to Sumer, to Mesopotamia, but definitely not to a Neolithic civilization that supposedly still had no knowledge of agriculture, still transitioning from an hunter-gatherer stage. But this is also the puzzle and the paradox of a site like Giza, for instance, where you find usually the oldest and some of the most complex structures are not the latest, but the earliest. It's as if a civilization went through a process of devolution, of descent almost, in which instead of finding a linear evolution, you find quite the opposite. It's a constant degradation. It's also what you find at Gobekli Tepe, where usually the most complex, the most sophisticated enclosure of the site are also some of the earliest. And then it's as if the people there got consistently worse at temple building instead of evolving, and there was just nothing for thousands of years afterwards. That's a real paradox.
And isn't it strange that the same comments that you can make about Giza, you turn around and you apply that to Gobekli Tepe? And one of those concepts, and you speak about this in the book, that when we look at Giza and for Egypt at 3000 BC, that knowledge came too fast and too quick. They were already an upright civilization, totally functional at 3000 BC. And they went from allegedly Stone Age hunter-gatherers, lost in the desert, to suddenly building pyramids 150 years later. That's incredible. They must have gotten that knowledge from somewhere. But it's the same situation with Gobekli Tepe, which will take us eventually to Atlantis, in that somebody had to teach whoever built Gobekli Tepe how to quarry stone, right? They must have known something about agriculture. They knew geometry. They knew astronomy. They had a pretty firm grasp on the arts, and they were able to display artistic talent. None of that was supposed to exist. So somebody had to teach them how to do things, right?
Exactly, and I think that's the nature of the problem. So the late and great John Anthony West had once said that Egyptian civilization is not a development, it's a legacy from something that came before. When you actually look at particularly the great achievements of the early dynasties, we're talking about the pyramids, the great megalithic monuments of Egypt, what you see is a level of sophistication was unequaled and unparalleled in all later dynasties throughout all the rest of Egyptian history. You have these incredible stone vessels, for instance, have been found in some of the earliest Egyptian tombs. They were cut out of the hardest stone, and nothing like this was ever produced throughout the over 3,000 years of the known Egyptian history, throughout the historical period. So it's as if this knowledge, and it would include also the calendar, for instance, hieroglyphic writing, came already fully formed, perfectly developed to Egypt, as if it had been brought from elsewhere. And I think that's also the case with Gobekli Tepe. This is a knowledge that started somewhere else and was brought there.
Now, which takes us to the book, Empires of Atlantis. The ideas for the book came from where? What motivated you to write it?
Well, it's as I think you also mentioned, it's been really the product of over 15 years of research into the question of ancient civilization and of asking a number of questions at these sites. One of these questions is just where did this knowledge come from, really? And so when you're confronted with these very enigmatic monuments, you must wonder who are these people that built these structures? So where did they come from? And this put me on a quest, and a search for the origin, what I believe at this point was a lost civilization of the last ice age that created this culture. And not only talking about the material evidence, I'm also very much interested in the cultural legacy that it left across mythical tradition, across historical records, symbolism throughout the world, because this is a language that is probably even more than stone monuments that are artifacts able to cross the centuries and the thousands of years that separate us from that civilization. And I think that right now we're also at a very important turning point in history. In many ways, I think that the very path on which our civilization is, in a certain way, mirrors the path of that lost civilization. In a way, we're repeating the same errors, the same mistake. That's why I think that the story of Atlantis, this great lost civilization, is still very actual and very current today.
Is it, as we start to go back in the timeline here, is it just a classic case of entropy, repeating itself? That Atlantis started out simple, the planet started out simple, but and then just got too complex, and then entropy takes over, and then we have the clutter, and what is left over, just like modern civilization today, we're about to get a little bit too complex, and that's probably what happened in Egypt. Maybe entropy is what happened with Rome. They just got too complex. Rome was very simple at 400 BC, went and expanded across Europe and got into the United Kingdom. Too much, too complex, and then you implode. Is that what happened with Atlantis?
I do think so, and you have many examples throughout history of great civilizations that thrive for centuries, even thousands of years, and then all of a sudden they decline and disappear. One example is ancient Rome. Of course, that's an example that's very close to us, but you think also of the ancient Maya, of the Khmer Empire in Cambodia, just left ruins behind. There were these mighty, powerful empires, and then all of a sudden they were gone. And so I do not think that our own modern civilization is immune to that process, particularly if you consider just how complex, how interrelated, interconnected our civilization has become.
So let's talk about the timeline. How far back, because I want to start at a certain point, you have to make decisions in this story, in the way that you put this together, and you get the evidence piled up in front of you. How far back were you willing to go in a timeline?
Well, I would say, and this is also what I discuss in the book, around 500,000 years ago. This is the timeline of the first appearance of anatomically modern humans on the planet. This is also a timeline that coincides with most esoteric chronologies as well. This is something that they mention very frequently in the book. There's only so much that we can learn from the evidence of archaeology, of geology, of anthropology. But on the other hand, we have all these mythical traditions from around the world that speak of a lost golden age, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so that's the time frame when I think the whole history of human civilization starts, that history of these lost civilization begins. And this is a history that then stretches for tens of thousands of years until the final collapse of this civilization, with moments of great prosperity and different cycles of decadence.
Now, okay, so let's start right there. 500,000 years ago, that start, did it start on Earth, or was there something else that was involved that may have been brought here?
Well, again, this is a very interesting question. And to begin with, I'm not a believer in the ancient aliens hypothesis or anything of that kind. So I do not believe there was any direct influence, let's say, of any extraterrestrial civilization on Earth. I think this was essentially a terrestrial civilization, even though I'm open to admitting some influence from other let's call them other dimensions or planes of existence. I know this is probably a concept that will make many of the more scientifically minded within the audience cringe, but this is at the core of the teachings of so many ancient traditions and mythical traditions throughout the world. We have this idea of the incarnation of certain divine principles. It's at the root, if you think about that, of truly most of the modern religions. So I don't think this is entirely implausible to suggest that this ancient civilization was somehow started from beings that were perhaps multidimensional, not necessarily belonging to this plane of existence, that at some point incarnated on Earth, took on human form and triggered this great process of human evolution.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're not completely out of the box then. You're somewhat inside the box. I believe we were just dropped off. I just think that it's way, the odds are too great that our DNA just altered overnight, and then here we are, Homo sapiens sapien. It was just a magic of nature. No. I'm more comfortable thinking that we were just dropped off. You know, a bus pulled up, the door opened, and out we came. That answers questions for me much more easily than turning this over to Darwin or natural evolution. That's just me. But let's go back to now. So 500, where did this centralized civilization call home? What part of the world?
Well, what they suggest is that this civilization originated from a now lost mid-Atlantic landmass. I'm going to call it a landmass and not necessarily a continent, because there is lots of debate as to what we should consider a continent. But the geological evidence shows that in what is today the mid-Atlantic Ocean, particularly the region of the mid-Atlantic ridge, there was a pretty extensive landmass that survived above water until comparatively recent times. These are an area of significant geological activity. You have many active volcanoes. It's the region of the Azores Plateau, right, for instance. And this is where I believe these civilizations started. It's also the place where I suggest the first truly anatomically modern humans appeared and then spread throughout the world.
So not South Africa, not Africa, but the Azores.
Not necessarily. I think that right now, even if you look at modern evolutionary theory, you have different models of evolution suggest what is called a multi-regional approach, in which different modern human species developed in different regions of the world. So right now, you not only have Homo sapiens sapiens, you also have Neanderthals, you have Denisovans, for instance. And so I would not actually embrace the possibility that an entirely separate human species could have developed on a now sunken mid-Atlantic landmass, and then throughout the course of millennia also mixed with other human or hominin species to give rise to what we call modern humanity.
Let's take our break right here. Fascinating start to this conversation tonight, Marco. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer and UNX networks. The new book is called The Empires of Atlantis. It is a fantastic read. We've got the links up throughout social media to go and get your copy. More with Marco after this short break. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse. KUNX-DB. The X.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Because you never got that pony you always wanted. Damn it. Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network.
Listen, I know, and you know, that you've always wanted your first crystal skull. Or maybe you're a collector just like me, but you just don't know where to go to find the real thing. Then I met Carolyn Ford over at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Carolyn is the guardian of Einstein, one of the most respected ancient crystal skulls in the world. All of her unique skulls have been imprinted sitting with Einstein in his sacred lodge and are carved from the finest gemstone and materials. Imprinting is the process of receiving the ancient wisdom from the master skull or master computer, Einstein, the ancient crystal skull. To see Carolyn's current collection of crystal skulls, just visit her store at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com or click on the banner over on our site. Don't forget to use the promo code Jimmy at checkout to receive 10% off of your order today. That's promo code Jimmy. Finding your first or next crystal skull is easy. Just visit EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roasted to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today.
Hello, I'm Katie and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
We're
of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Marco Vigato is here. First-time guest. Love it. Talking about his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. We're going to pick up the conversation where we left off. It's a lot to discuss tonight, and Marco, as you started to approach this, I think one of the questions that everybody has, including myself, what considerations did you take for some of the classic sides of Atlantis and its origins, like Plato, or even through to modern things like maybe even Edgar Cayce and some of his readings on Atlantis? Did you consider all of that, or did you throw all of that out and start with a blank piece of paper?
No, I did consider all of that. Actually, when you talk about Atlantis, you have to keep in mind that there are at least two main streams of Atlantology. One that I call more scientific Atlantology, which is more based on the search for the physical evidence of Atlantis, and another one that I call esoteric Atlantology. And so I'm also interested in esoteric Atlantology because I think there are many insights you can draw from that can help complement and in many ways also support the evidence and the findings from scientific Atlantology. When you're talking about Plato's account of Atlantis, it's probably the most famous story of Atlantis. Many of us will be familiar with Plato's story of this great civilization that vanished over 10,000 years ago and sunk in the ocean. But the purpose of Plato's account was mostly to describe the fall of this great civilization. It was to really describe a concept of cyclical time. In a way, Atlantis came to represent for Plato and for many of the Greek philosophers the civilization of the last golden age. So there is also an esoteric message underlying Plato's account. And then this is a tradition that continued for hundreds of years afterwards. In a way, the myth of Atlantis has become almost a foundational myth of the Western esoteric tradition. If you think about theosophy, if you think about the likes of Rudolf Steiner, for instance, Edgar Cayce, also they all talk about Atlantis, even though the means by which these esoteric knowledge may have been acquired could appear questionable to some. They're clearly non-scientific methods. Nevertheless, some of the insights that can be gathered through these approaches, through these methods on the lost civilization, I find them extremely valuable for reconstruction of the ancient past.
Now, with Plato, we see some pretty strange parallels, not only on how and when he wrote about Atlantis and where he got the information from, but then we can go right to Egypt and Edfu and the history of Egypt that is clearly represented there, which strongly suggest an island empire and the arrival of teachers that predated Egypt by 10,000 years. And I don't think that is coincidence either. Did you look at that aspect?
Absolutely. And well, Plato never claimed to have invented the story of Atlantis. He actually states very clearly that the story of Atlantis had an Egyptian origin.
Right.
It was a tale that was told by the priests of Heliopolis to Plato's own grandfather, to Solon, and Plato then compiled in one of his, in actually two of his philosophical treatises, the Timaeus and the Critias. However, Plato is adamant that the origin of the story was Egyptian. Now, if you look at the Egyptian records, you find several documents that seem to support Plato's story. One of these is a set of texts that was found inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Edfu in Upper Egypt, and that's the reason why these are called the Edfu building texts. They describe, in a way very similar to Plato's account of Atlantis, the destruction and sinking of the original homeland of the gods, and how these gods gods then sailed and moved into Egypt, where they started the great pre-dynastic civilization of the Shamsu-Hor, as they're called in these texts, or the companions of Horus. And this is by no means the only account, because we also have ancient Egyptian chronologies that describe dynasties of kings, of gods and demigods that ruled tens of thousands of years before the beginning of recorded history. They also seem to match this description of Plato and the Edfu building text, while providing as well a chronological frame of reference for these events.
Now we have to connect that to the Azores. Now this is where, well, it's great and it's interesting, but you still have to connect the dots, and we have a huge span of time there that is in between. So how did you connect the Azores to the Edfu text?
Well, if you look at the ancient Egyptian myths and the Edfu building texts, they speak about a land in the west. It was actually the point of origin of the Egyptian gods. So whenever the Egyptians thought about their gods, like Osiris thought, they always described them as the Westerners. There are a number of Egyptian texts that explicitly suggest the original homeland of these gods, where they came from, was located in the West. Now, it's interesting that when you look, for instance, the myths of Mesoamerica, of the ancient Mesoamerican people that came even before the time of the Mayas, the Aztecs, they invariably talk about the initiators of their culture, their civilization, coming from the East, in a way that suggests that wherever that common central culture was located, it was east of America, but west of Egypt and Africa. And the only plausible location that is really in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. Now
we are suggesting a transoceanic culture that wasn't supposed to exist. Now, we're going to talk about that, but this is where the historians, the anthropologists, the archaeologists are going to step up and say, now this is where we can't go. We can't go into this zone.
Right, and part of the reason for that is that, again, as Plato says, but also these ancient Egyptian records state, this land disappeared towards the end of the last ice age. This is why we do not find direct evidence, or as much direct evidence, of this civilization. Now, if we look at the geological evidence from the Atlantic seafloor, what that shows is that some extensive landmass existed in that area that broke up and sunk over tens of thousands of years. So we do not have necessarily to think about a single episode of sinking, as Plato describes, but rather a process that probably lasted over several thousands of years, included the gradual breakup and sinking of this great mid-Atlantic landmass. And what they suggest in the book is that this process actually extended for thousands of years after the end of the last ice age, very well into the European Bronze Age, and caused multiple waves of migration from these mid-Atlantic landmass towards, on the one hand, the coast of Europe and North Africa, and on the other hand, towards the American continent.
So Gibraltar was like a highway, right? Where the culture on boats is going into Europe, is going into the Mediterranean, and landing on the coastline all the way through to Jerusalem and in Egypt.
It was in a way. What it suggests is that this mid-Atlantic civilization controlled the trade flows between what we may call the old world, Europe and North Africa, and the American continent. They were really at the center of this transoceanic trade network, and the knowledge of these islands survived very well into classical antiquity as well. It's very well possible that the Phoenicians, for instance, still preserve some knowledge of that, and some portions of these lost landmass survived during the classical antiquity, when we find the records also in the texts of the Greek and Roman historians that describe various trading centers like Tartessos, for instance, which is another lost city supposedly located off the coast of Spain, in a way where the natural successors of Atlantis are directing and controlling these great transoceanic routes.
Now, what is your image of Atlantis throughout this period? We have, the esoteric side of it, crystal cathedrals and cities and rings within rings and elegant harbors and technology and all of this. What's your version of Atlantis?
Well, you have to think that this civilization spanned tens of thousands of years. So over that time frame, Atlantean civilization itself changed very deeply. I do believe that, particularly in the early stages of Atlantean civilization, that was a culture that was probably much more spiritual in a way. So much more like the Atlantean civilization that is depicted in esoteric tradition, a civilization that had perhaps a direct control over certain forces, over the life force, over some fundamental energies on our planet and in the universe, which they used for their purposes. Whereas towards the later stages of Atlantean civilization, it looks like a more mechanical type of technology developed on Atlantis. And this is where we have evidence, for instance, of the movement of these huge masses of stones, of what looks like ancient machining, for instance, on stones in Egypt, in South America. And so throughout all these thousands of years, Atlantean civilization evolved as well. And that's why it's difficult to speak of just a single Atlantean civilization, where I rather divide that into different time periods or characterize also the different levels of evolution and technological development.
Now, just like we can suggest somebody was teaching the ancient Egyptians, somebody was teaching whoever built Gobekli Tepe, which we don't have a clue, somebody had to have taught the Atlanteans as well. Where did their knowledge come from?
Well, according to esoteric tradition, that knowledge came from spiritual entities or multidimensional beings. So esoteric tradition maintains that the initiators of Atlantean civilization were these highly evolved souls or beings that incarnated on Earth as soon as a suitable vessel, a suitable human body became available through the processes of physical evolution and anthropology. And then these started the first Atlantean civilization. In a way, the process may be better described as the fall or the incarnation of a divine element into matter, into a human body, which is also, by the way, what Plato suggests in his story of Atlantis when he talks about the original Atlanteans were divine, and then they degraded as the human element became more prevalent, and that's what led to the decadence of Atlantean civilization.
Were the Atlanteans two things, if we stay on this thought process, two things must have happened. One, the Atlanteans were just out traveling, teaching, and getting into cultures around the world. Okay, there's that part. It had nothing to do with the catastrophe. Or the catastrophe happened and they had to split and then infiltrate the cultures around the world. Which way do you think it went?
I think it's much more likely the second. The evidence suggests that Atlantean civilization was still mostly an insular civilization throughout the first thousands of years of its history. So it was mostly limited still to this mid-Atlantic landmass that this civilization occupied. It was only as a consequence of geological instability and the sinking of this mid-Atlantic landmass that Atlantean colonists started settling in other lands throughout the world. They started establishing colonies. And of course, this process was much accelerated by the cataclysms around the end of the last ice age, which caused the last major sinking of land in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. That's the time when Plato also situates the sinking of the last islands of Atlantis.
Now, what was the population of Atlantis at its peak? What was the population as things started to change with the landmass? And then, of course, the million-dollar question, how many got off the island?
Well, if we believe Plato's account, which, by the way, is very much in line with the esoteric tradition, Atlantis must have had an enormous population. We're talking about millions of people. Just the size of the capital city of Atlantis itself was enormous. The scale of the engineering works described by Plato, the gigantic canals, the harbors that were created, they clearly suggest that Atlantis had an enormous population at the time, probably in the tens of millions, I would say. Now, when you talk about how many people survived, how many people left Atlantis, again, we must think in the order of the tens of thousands or even more. Some of these colonies the Atlanteans established throughout the world might have been very populous. If you think about, of the Egyptian colony, for instance, just looking at the scale of the constructions of the engineering works, we're going to talk about that. They clearly suggest a very large population, a very large permanent population in these areas.
Now, okay, so as this happened, was it, and I like the way that you say east and west, right, that this was central, but this distribution of knowledge happened almost overnight then, because they left the island or the continent, the landmass, whatever you want to call it, all at the same time. So they went east into the Americas, and they went west into Europe and into the Middle East?
Well, it did not happen all at the same time. The reason is that also the sinking of the Atlantean landmass was gradual, so there were different episodes of subsidence. So what it suggests is that there was one major episode of subsidence, one major cataclysm around 35,000 years BC, and then a second one around 11,000 years BC, just around the time of the Younger Dryas. These were the two main migrations outside of Atlantis, which mostly went into Egypt, into Mesopotamia, into South America, where you see the development of these Atlantean colonies at that time. Now, if we think about also the influence that Atlantean colonists had on the people that were already settled in these areas, something that I suggest in the book, and it's again confirmed by a number of mythical traditions, is that they almost maintained a monopoly on technology and on civilization, in a way that they certainly taught the local people, the indigenous population, were still mostly hunter-gatherers. At the time, certain aspects of agriculture, of the calendar, but they kept at the same time a very strict monopoly, for instance, on metallurgy, on the use of metals, on some of the most sophisticated aspects, certainly, of their science, on their mechanical technology. And probably this was motivated by fear that eventually a larger, even though more primitive population would overturn them and take control over these colonies. So they kept a very rigid segregation almost in the lands where they settled.
What happened at 35,000 BC?
Well, this was the first, what they call the first Atlantean cataclysm. This is a time when ancient Babylonian documents and sources, for instance, situate the first Great Flood. I'm talking about the first Great Flood because, in fact, there were many. There was not just one, as in the Bible, but if you look at many of these ancient chronologies, speak about multiple cataclysms. So at this time, you have the testimony of Sumerian and cuneiform text that locate this great cataclysm, the first flood, around at that time. So that marks the end of the first divine dynasties before the beginning of a second period, second phase of history, which is characterized by more human or semi-divine dynasties. Whereas in the esoteric tradition, that marks the first major sinking of land in the mid-Atlantic Ocean and the first great migration or exodus from Atlantis. Now, in the esoteric tradition, you also have the story of a division within Atlantean society between, to use the words of Edgar Cayce, what are called the children of Belial and the sons of the Law of One. So almost as to suggest that two different factions emerged within Atlantean society at that time that caused division, that caused almost a civil war within Atlantean civilization and the breakup of Atlantean culture itself and of the centers of Atlantean civilization.
Now, we're going to take a break in about 10 minutes. One of the things that has been going on for many, many decades is the search for Atlantis. And we have everything from obviously islands around Greece and the Mediterranean and inside and outside the Straits of Gibraltar, through the Middle Atlantic, all the way over to the Pacific and the South China Sea, in and around India, in the southern coast, north of New Zealand. We have different areas that have been explored around the world. And I think each one of those areas has its own supporting evidence, but yet we haven't been able to confirm anything. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are many underwater cities, right? If we just think about the events of the end of the last ice age with the melting of the polar ice caps, it's estimated global sea levels rose by over 120 meters. So we're talking about almost 400 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so many coastal lands, many cities that certainly existed at the time along the coast became submerged at the time. And that's why we have so many Atlantices, in a way, or lost cities, underwater cities that have been found throughout the world. And now, if you ask me the question, are all of these Atlantis? Then the answer is certainly no. I think if we look at both at Plato's account and the esoteric tradition, it's quite unequivocal that the location of Atlantis was in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. There can be no doubt, according to the esoteric tradition, that that was the location of Atlantis. Now, this does not exclude the possibility that other, even large land masses existed in other parts of the world. There are talks of Mu, for instance, in the Pacific Ocean, of Lemuria as well, that might have existed even before the time of Atlantis. But these would have been located more in the Indian and Pacific Oceans.
Yes. Now, there is, and I've seen quite a few documentaries now, evidence in the Azores of something going on there way before there were boats. But the representation there appears to have boats in the imaging. But there is a lack of funding, and there isn't a focus on the Azores because it's not Giza, right? It's not Gobekli Tepe. What do you think about the research that is happening right now?
I think it's research has been ongoing for decades now. In the book I actually dedicated several chapters to discussing the geological evidence for a sunken mid-Atlantic continent. Now, what you have to think is what you see today, nowadays, in the Azores, these islands would have been just the mountain tops of this sunken landmass. So it's quite natural that there will be very little evidence of civilization on these islands, just because these were the mountain tops. It's almost as if in 10,000 years, future explorers would investigate the summit of Mount Everest. What vestiges of modern civilization would be found up there? So you have to think about, first of all, the fact that what survives today of this Atlantic landmass were areas that were almost entirely devoid of population. The major centers of population would have been located along the coast, in the plains, that are now sunken thousands of feet deep in the Atlantic Ocean. And the possibility, I think, and I'm quite pessimistic, honestly, on the possibility of ever uncovering any direct evidence of this structure, just because of the geology of the Atlantic seafloor. Any remains of advanced civilizations, of cities, would have been entirely covered under hundreds of meters or thousands of feet of lava flows and sediments at the bottom of the ocean. So it would really take a major endeavor to even detect those remnants.
Now, there is some megalithic evidence on different islands in the Azores right now that certainly would indicate a presence there going back thousands of years when there shouldn't have been anybody there.
There is, and I find it extremely puzzling. I think you probably refer to the evidence that's been uncovered on Terceira Island, which is one of the islands in the Azores, of megalithic structures, not unlike the ones you find in Europe and North Africa with dolmens, menhirs. There are even some rock-cut caves. Now, one of the questions is who created these structures? Because allegedly, when the Portuguese first colonized the Azores in the 15th century, they found no trace of local inhabitants. The islands were completely uninhabited at the time, and yet they describe numerous monuments. They even describe a large statue on the island of Corvo, and many remnants of civilization clearly existed on these islands thousands of years before. So these almost suggest that some survivors from an earlier civilization created these monuments, probably before disappearing, before vanishing. They might have just died out. They might have migrated to other lands in search of better lands, of more sustenance. We do not know, but clearly these islands were inhabited already thousands of years ago. And this prompts a question: how did these people get there if they were not already there? If these islands were not really the remnant of a sunken landmass, because we're talking about islands that are hundreds or thousands of miles off the nearest coasts of Europe and Africa.
Yeah, that cave, that entrance to the cave, that is old. That is old. And I can only imagine what the Portuguese were thinking. You know, it's supposed to be uninhabited, and then you find structures. You find man-made stuff there that has been there for a very long time. Something's going on in the Azores, and we need to focus some more research and funding and resources there to find out. I think it's as significant as Gobekli Tepe, maybe even more so, but nobody is paying attention to it right now.
It is, absolutely. If you look also at the geological evidence, there is evidence of extinct riverbeds, for instance, in the Azores. They continue for over 250 miles off the present-day coast of the island, which suggests that there would have been a very extensive landmass surrounding the Azores. And there is certainly, I think, lots that can be uncovered using sonar equipment by just analyzing the seafloor around the Azores. Now, as I said, I'm pretty pessimistic about the possibility of finding any intact buildings, but some of the largest engineering works, if you think, for instance, of the description that Plato gives of the earthworks, the great canals that were created by the Atlanteans, it is possible that some of that might still be identified even after thousands of years.
Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Marco Vigato is with us. We're discussing his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer and UNX Networks. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
This is Jimmy Church. Jason Martell's book, Knowledge Apocalypse 10-Year Anniversary Edition, is now available. Most ancient cultures speak of a time when their gods visited them. They never say their gods came from across the ocean or from the mountains. They always came down from the skies. Was ancient man visited by gods or extraterrestrials? We have not been told the full truth about our human past. There was a time when all the ancient cultures lived amongst beings they considered their gods. The search for truth leads us down the path of learning where the ETs might come from and why they are here. To understand some of these advanced topics and learn the truth about human origins, buy the new book from Jason Martell, Knowledge Apocalypse, now in its 10-year anniversary edition, available on Amazon.com by clicking on the banners over on our site, or simply visit JasonMartell.com. That's JasonMartell.com. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Fadernauts. When you think about the future of our country and where we're headed, do you wonder about the food supply? I do. Disruptions in the food supply chain could be disastrous, and they usually occur with little warning. That's why the smartest thing you can do today is to stockpile emergency food, water, and other essentials. I personally recommend My Patriot Supply. They're the nation's largest emergency preparedness company, serving millions of customers for more than a decade. In fact, they're the only source my family trusts for our preparedness plan. You should too. Right now, save 20% off a full 4-week supply of delicious meals that provide 2,000 calories a day. Saving 20% helps too, doesn't it? Especially now. So go to preparewithjimmy.com and get ready. That's preparewithjimmy.com. There's no time to lose. Do it now.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRAradio.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Marco Vigato is with us live from Mexico City. He's from Italy. He lives in Mexico City now. We're talking about his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. Now, this is where we need to discuss, I understand, the esoteric traditions and the work of so many researchers. They've been on this show, from John Anthony West to Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch and Robert Bauval and all of them. But What about the opposite? Let's talk about the ancient cultures here in North, Central, South America. What do they say about influences from the outside?
Right. So when you look at the ancient mythologies from Central America, from the Mayas, the Aztecs, even earlier than that, from the time of the Olmecs in South America, they always talk about civilization as a gift from the gods. So you have the myths of Quetzalcoatl in Central America, the feathered serpent, who allegedly came from the east and brought civilization to these lands, which included a knowledge of the calendar, of agriculture, of astronomy. You have very similar traditions also in South America, where you have myths of Tunupa, of Viracocha, that have very similar attributes. These are godlike figures, but they were also flesh and bone individuals. I think that's a very important distinction. Whenever the ancient accounts speak about these civilizing gods, they talk about real physical beings that came and brought a much more advanced civilization. They became the initiators of civilization in Mesoamerica. And when you look also at the evidence for that, you have these incredible achievements of science and technology. For instance, you have the Maya calendar, which is one of the most sophisticated of the ancient world. It also sprang as if out of nowhere. We find some of the earliest traces of the Maya, what has become known as the Maya calendar, but should be truly called the Olmec or pre-Olmec calendar. We find evidence of that already in 1500 BC, some claim even as early as 2000 BC, and it was already perfectly developed. There would be no evolution of that calendar throughout the following 3,000 years of Mesoamerican history. So again, you have these almost amazing, almost impossible technological developments and scientific achievements that would never be repeated throughout the course of history. And then you have myths and traditions that claim that these were gifts from the gods. They were brought from somewhere else by these very advanced beings.
Did they, there were, okay, I don't want to suggest anything here, but when the Spanish showed up, certainly when they started asking questions, you know, who built this, where did this come from? And the oral traditions would say, and that it started to get documented by the Spanish, that they described a physical presence of a human that didn't fit their culture. It was a description that did not fit what the Spanish were seeing. It was almost as if they were describing the Spanish, but the Spanish hadn't gotten there yet.
Yes. And this is not the only evidence. I think that actually we have to rethink the picture of pre-Columbian societies as largely multi-ethnic societies. Right. So there were individuals belonging to very different ethnicities.
Right.
And certainly they do believe that sailors and navigators from the ancient world had also reached the coasts of North and South America in ancient times. It might have been at the base of many of these traditions of like foreign-looking people that arrived in these lands. So that when the Spanish came, they were hailed, they were greeted as gods. That happened in Mexico, that happened in South America, because some of their physical attributes, like the fact, like their complexion, the fact that they had beards, for instance, the use of metal horses, these were all attributes that since the earliest times were associated or had been associated with these civilizing gods, that many of the Mesoamerican and South American peoples believed that visited them thousands of years earlier.
Did this, I want to kind of venture around the world with the same question. What about Asia? Did they have the same traditions of being taught from a culture that arrived?
But you find these traditions pretty much throughout the world. So if you look at Mesopotamia, which is technically part of Asia, it's in Western Asia, you have the idea, the tradition of the Oannes, the Apkallos, these gods that came in ancient times.
Right, right.
According to Babylonian priests, taught humanity the arts of civilization. Even in the biblical account in the Bible, you have the story of the Watchers and the Nephilim, particularly this idea of the fallen angels that became the first teachers of mankind. Even if you look farther east in India, you have very similar stories of the deluge of the seven sages, that after the deluge they repromulgated civilization. And as far as China, even though I may not necessarily be that familiar with Far Eastern mythologies, but you have mythical accounts that stretch back hundreds of thousands of years. In the case of some of the earliest chronologies of China, you have mythical god emperors that were also considered to be the inventors of the calendar of agriculture and brought civilization to these lands.
It seems to be repeating, around the world. Now, is there going to be a change? Are you seeing a change in Orthodox academia to starting to have a more open mind about a high-tech civilization that predated everything, that it must have existed? Is this starting to change now? The evidence is starting to suggest it.
Yeah, I do think that we are very close to witnessing a change of paradigm in the field of history and archaeology. With every new discovery, we're constantly pushing back the origins, we're pushing back in time the origins of human civilization. If you think of the discovery of a site as Gobekli Tepe, as we talked about, has completely rewritten the picture of prehistory. I'm sure there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of sites like Gobekli Tepe that are going to be discovered over the following years, over the following decades. And this is going to bring about a radical shift in paradigm in the field of archaeologists. But even more than that, I think that archaeologists is a very traditionalist discipline, in the sense that archaeologists tend to approach their subject of study from an almost isolationist point of view. So you have specialists in Mesoamerican civilization, you have Egyptologists, specialists in Mesopotamian civilizations, and they very rarely are able to draw comparisons among all these different civilizations. So wherever you find similar myths, similar traditions in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, and in Mesoamerica, it's very hard to connect the dots and to draw the connection. So I think this also requires a shift in the way the whole discipline of archaeology is structured, a much more holistic view of the question of human origins and the development of human civilizations that is not just limited to a specific place, but it really encompasses this idea of a global prehistoric civilization.
Now, what about the northern part of Europe, all the way over into Russia and Siberia, Denisovan, of course, Scandinavia, and that entire area, that northern stretch of the continent? Do they have the same oral traditions?
Well, there's many very interesting traditions, particularly if you think about the region of Scandinavia, the northern Atlantic Ocean. You have the tradition, which is also reported by the classical authors of Thule, of this mythical northern land. Even before that, you have the tradition of Hyperborea, this land located in the far north. It was also supposed to be the home of a very advanced civilization that enjoyed an almost paradisiacal climate, an eternal spring, which sounds quite paradoxical now if you think about it, the conditions that, like the very harsh winters, the cold weather that is prevalent at these latitudes, but is not entirely inconsistent with the possibility that in very ancient times, the Earth's axis was more vertical, maybe even perpendicular, which would have created the kind of climatological conditions at these extreme northern latitudes that could have supported even an advanced civilization.
Now, and what about the Denisovan?
Well, with the Denisovans, there has been lots of research on the subject around the Denisova cave. These very remarkable artifacts are also found. There is the example of a bracelet made of polished stone that was found in the Denisova cave. It's been dated to over 70,000 years ago. It's a remarkable artifact that shows evidence of high-speed drilling. Now, I'm not talking about a machine. I'm talking about still like manual tools, but of a sophistication that was previously considered impossible or not achieved by modern humans until just a few thousand years ago. Now you find these very complex, very sophisticated artifacts in layers that have been dated to over 70,000 years old. And there is the question about what and how these Denisovans really look like. The reality is that we haven't found a single complete skeleton of a Denisovan. Many authors, like Andrew Collins, for instance, they suggest that the Denisovans were also physical giants in a way. They might have been at the root of many legends, many traditions of giants throughout the world. And it's certainly possible they also possessed a very refined artistic sensitivity, sophisticated civilization in a way. And after migrating outside of their Central Asian homeland, they might have also influenced the development of civilization in neighboring regions, including the Middle East.
Yeah, well, the two caves outside of Jerusalem just recently, which shows evidence of, and I still can't even believe I'm about to say what I'm about to say and sound sane, but finding evidence of burial traditions and fires and cooking 250,000 years ago. This is crazy talk, isn't it? That purely should never have existed.
Well, it is and it isn't. The reality is that we know so little about the origins of humanity. Pretty much our entire picture of early human origins is based only on a handful of skeletal remains that have been found that are clearly not representative of the millions of individuals that clearly must have lived on the planet at the time. And so I think we have a very partial, a very fragmented view of prehistory, of the whole question of human origins. Now, with genetics, this picture is changing, because even though we may not necessarily find the physical remnants of these early human ancestors, still their footprint, their legacy survives in our DNA, in our genes, which suggests a number of interesting things. I think increasingly the view of human origins is that we are a hybrid species as a result of the crossbreeding of different hominin species, Neanderthals, early modern humans, Denisovans as well. And we carry a bit of that DNA. It's very well possible that in our own DNA, in our own genetic code, some of that ancient DNA, what they call Atlantean DNA, might as well survive.
Now, staying on this, we've brought up Gobekli Tepe many times tonight. It's one of my favorite subjects. I think it's so important, and you are right. There are thousands of Gobekli Tepes that haven't been discovered yet, that are going to start pushing this date even further back. But in the migration, in the consideration of the title of the book, The Empires of Atlantis, right? The migration going through Europe into Siberia, the constructors, the possibility, I should say, of Gobekli Tepe may have come from the north and not from the south, that knowledge, right? Even though it's very close to Giza, it's not quite a walk, but it's geographically fairly close on the coast of Siberia and Turkey. But that knowledge could have come from the north-south, right?
I think it's a very plausible hypothesis, and again, this is a theory that's been embraced more recently by Andrew Collins when he suggests that Denisovans or some descendants of Denisovans migrated from Siberia and from Central Asia into the Middle East and then give origin to this culture and civilization of Gobekli Tepe. Now, what I find interesting is that even if we look at the esoteric tradition, you have this idea that after all the long series of migrations outside of Atlantis, a secondary center of civilization was established in Central Asia. There is this idea in the esoteric tradition that Asia was really the cradle of post-Atlantean humanity. What in the esoteric tradition is the fifth root race of humanity. So it's very well possible that these also might have exerted an influence over the development of civilization in the Middle East. Actually, what it suggests in the book is an even more complex picture in which during the last 15 or 20,000 years, you had an interplay of different forces. So you had an Atlantean or Neo-Atlantean element that was mostly coming from the west and from the south, in a way, from Egypt, and these lands have been colonized by Atlanteans. And then you have another element coming more from Central Asia that might have as well overlapped with the Denisovan tradition there, that somehow interacted and influenced each other.
Now, when you have an advanced culture like Atlantis, you have to somehow teach somebody that may not have a grasp of anything, math, science, right, agriculture. You're starting at zero. How was that achieved? And my next question is, to apply to that, what was the ethnicity of the Atlanteans? Because that would directly affect who is teaching who, and they're looking at somebody that may not have the same appearance as their own civilization, their own town, right? So how was this achieved?
Well, to answer your first question, I do think that many of these ancient sites, including Gobekli Tepe, were essentially technology transfer sites. They were almost like ancient universities, if you want, or places where a technology transfer happened between a more advanced elite and a still primitive human population, was mostly composed of hunter-gatherers at the time. And much of that knowledge transfer involved knowledge of agriculture. It's no coincidence around the same time as we have the flourishing of sites like Gobekli Tepe, you also have an agricultural revolution. You see the domestication of plants and animals that triggers these incredible leap in civilization, which is the Neolithic revolution. Now, to your second question about the ethnicity of the Atlanteans, again, I do not think that's a question that has a single answer. Again, much suggests that the Atlanteans themselves were a multi-ethnic civilization, so we cannot just narrow it down to a single ethnicity. What we have, however, are a number of accounts from the people that came in contact with this civilization that have left us physical descriptions of these teachers, of these very advanced civilization that came to them. And these descriptions are remarkably similar across the world. So they seem to portray individuals that were very tall to begin with, much taller than the local population, that had certain specific features like a very elongated shape of the skull that gave them almost a reptilian type of appearance. You have these very ancient sculptures, for instance, from the Ubaid period, from the Vinca culture as well in Eastern Europe, that portray these people with very elongated skulls, almost very deep-set eyes that almost make their visage, their face look like that of a viper. These are very, very peculiar representations. And you find also very similar depictions in Central and South America, for instance, where Quetzalcoatl was depicted as a feathered serpent. So you have almost like these images that these people looked up somehow different from other humans and from the local population. This, by the way, might have been the origin of such practices like that of cranial deformation, these elongated skulls that have been found in many parts of the world that suggest almost an attempt from the local population to look like these Atlanteans, these more advanced beings.
I always picture the Atlanteans looking like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Just this all-knowing this you know, a teacher like a Socrates, right? A Moses, a leader that would come in and do this. That was always my vision. I haven't heard about these other traditions and imagery of a different skull type or eye or facial structure.
Mm-hmm. That might be, again, if we think, for instance, of traditions, again, from Central and South America, depictions of Quetzalcoatl was depicted as a bearded. Something interesting also in their clothing is that it's always described as having the appearance of feathers. So you have legends of Quetzalcoatl as the feathered serpent. In Mesoamerica, you have these shamanistic culture in the region of Gobekli Tepe and the Near East that made these shamans look almost like vultures. There was a clearly cult of the vulture in these regions. You have depictions of the Babylonian Oannes, these again like semi-mythical creatures that brought civilization. They were described interestingly almost as fishes, as if their body was covered in scales, in a way, or at least like the clothing, the garments that they had. And even in the biblical description of the Watchers and the Nephilim, they're described in the very typical image of an angel as covered in feathers. So there was something also about their attire, their appearance, and clearly something to suggest that their physical appearance was different. In a certain way, it was terrifying to the local population. There are some wonderful and very interesting accounts, for instance, from the Book of Enoch, from the Book of Jubilees, that describe these beings that are called the Watchers, or angels, if you want. They're described as terrifying, as different from other humans, but at the same time capable of mixing with the local population, even of producing children.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we find in many of these traditions. So it means that even though they might have looked physically different, they were still part of the human race in a certain way. We're not talking about neither spiritual beings nor extraterrestrials. We're talking about real flesh and bone human beings, although probably of an ethnic type, very different from that of the local populations.
Let's take our break right here. Fascinating conversation. Our guest tonight, Marco Vigato, talking about his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. We're going to pick up where we're leaving off right here. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, VX.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? UNX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNX-DB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
Why is it we're not very good with our health regimen until it's too late? We don't put oil in the car until the engine blows up. When the body's out of balance, your health is not so good. Give your body some love. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Try our Life Change Tea, which cleanses you from harmful intruders. A clean colon is one of the ways to bring the body in balance. We also carry organic supplements to help you get where you need to go. So do your body a favor. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. You can even visit our sales page to save some dough. Does anybody call money dough anymore? Anyway, if you're looking for short, helpful health tips, go to YouTube and punch in Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. So, log on to getthetea.com, shop, get balanced, then learn some cool tips at Health Matters Now. You'll be glad you did. That's getthetea.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from Rivermoon. Just click on the Rivermoon Coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Gold loves chaos, uncertainty, and disarray. History shows us what gold does when people aren't sure about the government, the stock market, their jobs, or their retirement savings. Our national debt is skyrocketing. Gold and other precious metals are a defense measure against inflation and a stock market that might take years to recover. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? Call United Gold Group. We offer gold and other precious metals delivered securely within 72 hours. Are you worried about the stock market? We can also help you set up a real gold or silver IRA or a 401k. Safe and secure. United Gold Group makes gold ownership affordable. Call now and get up to $2,500 in free gold or silver with a qualified IRA. Call 800-753-8534. That's 800-753-8534 or visit unitedgoldgroup.com.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Marco Vigato is with us. We're talking about his new book, The Empires of Atlantis. The links for the book are out in all of our social media, and of course, you can visit marcovigato.com. And now, let's take a look at a few things here in this last segment. If we talk about, you establish a 500,000 year timeline. Okay, and I agree with that. The Nephilim and the Watchers, we're talking about very ancient times here. We are going way back. But there's another situation here that I'm wondering if this is folded into this, and that is, of course, the Anunnaki. And that conversation, which also fits into your timeline of 500,000 years, which goes back 400,000, 300,000, 200,000 years. And the suggestions, I think, over time have been a relationship between the Nephilim and the Watchers and the Anunnaki, and then we have Atlantis. Is there a connection?
Yeah, I do think that when we are talking about the Nephilim, the fallen angels or watchers, the Anunnaki, we're really talking about the same thing. If you also look at the root of some of these words, basically it suggests the same concept, the same image of shining beings. So the Anunnaki, that literally means the shining ones, right. The Anunnaki. Very similar also to traditional depictions of the angels, of the watchers, of the Nephilim in the biblical text. So I think we are really talking about messengers or survivors from some lost advanced civilization from these lands and taught the local population the arts of civilization. Many of the accounts that also describe the Anunnaki or Anunnaki and the fallen angels are also remarkably similar, even though we find one fundamental difference, because in many of these early Sumerian and Babylonian accounts, these are depicted as positive figures. These are the teachers of mankind, whereas in the biblical account, there is a curious reversal of roles in which these beings are first described in positive terms as the teachers of humanity, then become the fallen angels, they become demons. So these are the ones that lead humanity into sin, and that's the reason why, according to the Bible, then God has to call on a global flood, the great deluge, to cleanse humanity of that evil.
So how do you resolve this?
Well, what I suggest is that there are two different episodes of colonization from Atlantis. So one that occurred before the time of the Younger Dryas Cataclysm, which is also identified with the biblical flood, and a second one after the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. So we're talking about a time frame for the first colonization between 20,000 and 15,000 years BC. This is the time when I suggest many of the original Atlantean colonies in Egypt and in the Middle East were established. All of these was then almost completely wiped out at the time of the Younger Dryas Cataclysm, where we're talking about 11,000 years BC, and you have a second wave of colonization afterwards with these same missionaries coming, in this case, to re-establish civilization in the aftermath of the global cataclysm and to reintroduce agriculture, for instance, and many of the innovations that had perished and had become lost in the cataclysm.
So, Robert Schoch said to me once, well, he said it many times, but he said he can't say the A word in academia. And it's not, and we laughed about it. And he said, I'm not talking about aliens. I can say aliens now in academia. I can't say Atlantis. You can't do it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it has to do with all the esoteric lore that goes around Atlantis. I think that's a part of the Atlantis story that it's very hard to separate from it. You have so many traditions of Atlantis. I mean, talking specifically about the esoteric traditions. So when you're approaching the subject from a strictly scientific, a strictly materialistic point of view, what you do not want is to get all of these mixed up in the same pot, which, by the way, I think it is a mistake because you're losing some very important avenues of knowledge that, although they might have been gained or obtained by means, are not necessarily those of empirical science. I do not think that just because of that, they are less valid. One other reason why Atlantis has fallen so much in disfavor, I would say, in the academic field is and I do think to some extent there is a pointing that it's racist connotations, I would say. Like, in a way, the idea of Atlantis, the idea of a lost advanced civilization that came and brought civilization to these parts of the world, in a way, suggests it's almost an image of the age of European colonization, if you want. So this is clearly something that, for a number of reasons, is considered currently politically incorrect and therefore ostracized by academia. So I think there is also a component of that. I think we live in a world in which the mainstream view of the past, of history and archaeology, is one that suggests more like an independent origin of different cultures and civilizations. So it's moved away from this idea of single point of origin of civilization then spread to different parts of the world. So I do think this is also part of the negative image or stigma that the Atlantis myth has in academia.
Well, it would seem to me, Marco, that in order to move forward in knowledge, whatever your field of expertise is, I'm talking about in academia, you have to think outside of the box. You can't confine yourself inside of that, or you're not going to move forward. It's really that simple. But when it comes to knowledge, they absolutely want to draw a line in the sand and say there was nothing, there was no ancient high-tech civilization, period. Everything just happened. Right? That's their explanation. It just happened. You're not giving enough credit to humans. We just did it. And that's not satisfactory to me. There's another answer here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the whole problem with this linear evolution model of academia that in a certain way suggests that we went from more primitive, more simple types and forms of civilization towards more evolved and sophisticated cultures. But that's not what you find in the archaeological evidence. That's a fairy tale in reality, because when you look at, and again, we're going to go back to
Gobekli Tepe,
the Giza pyramids. That's not what you see. You have this incredible explosion of culture and civilization, and you have absolutely nothing for thousands of years. So it's really the ebbs and flows of civilization. It's a much more complex picture of our ancient past, and I think academia is just now starting to come to terms with that. It's not a linear process of evolution.
Well, when the debates go on about Gobekli Tepe, and we discuss the civilization that Gobekli Tepe was built, it didn't build itself. It was built, and to suggest that wasn't high tech, whatever your definition is of high tech at that time, that it just happened. They just happened to figure out how to quarry stone. They happened to figure these things out. No, there's another part to Gobekli Tepe that isn't discussed in academia. That is, they had to have organization, they had to have a government, they had to have a way of feeding and clothing and taking care of and security of everything else of that society that was around Gobekli Tepe at that time. It wasn't just a bunch of dudes wearing animal skins carving stones. No, everything else had to happen at the same time around Gobekli Tepe. That suggests a high-tech civilization. That wasn't Neanderthal. That wasn't Cro-Magnon. That wasn't just some dudes. I'm saying this in all seriousness, digging in the ground for seeds to eat. No, it was much more advanced than that.
Yeah, and now I think the key question is, do we really believe that Gobekli Tepe stood in isolation? Because right now, I think it's almost impossible to ignore the existence of Gobekli Tepe. It clearly exists. It's been studied now for over a decade, but still the position of mainstream archaeology is that it was almost an exception, right? So it was these almost incredible center of civilization. It was unparalleled in the rest of the world. And I find this to be a very unlikely explanation, because the reality is that just as we're finding Gobekli Tepe right now, how many more sites like that might exist that we do not know about? Even if we look at the location of Gobekli Tepe, there is nothing to suggest this was a very special spot or a very special place. It's located in southeastern Turkey. It's located far away from the coast or any major agricultural center or center of civilization. So we can only imagine if that was the level of civilization in relative backwater at that time, what would have been the level of civilization we would have found on the coast, for instance, at the same time. It's very likely we'll find even more sophisticated culture, even more sophisticated civilization. But unfortunately, much of that evidence is presently under the sea because of the rise in global sea levels at the end of the last ice age. So everything that might have existed on the coast, any trace of a global seafaring culture of the end of the last ice age would have been entirely submerged under over 400 feet of water. That's why we haven't found these evidence.
Now, so out of, I'm going to go down a few points. Out of Atlantis, we had agriculture and the domestication of wheat, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was...
Yes. That was one of the main innovations, because again you have these sudden appearance or emergence of agriculture. This is again one of those great mysteries that have never been satisfactorily explained by mainstream academia. How is it possible that for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, humanity was basically at a hunter-gathering stage? We basically knew how to light a fire and hunt animals. And then all of a sudden, around the same time, in different parts of the world, humanity discovered agriculture. They started domesticating plants, they started domesticating wheat, gourds, potatoes, with techniques that were extremely advanced and extremely sophisticated. Basically, pretty much all of the modern day crops originated around the same time. This is a paradox. It's never been satisfactorily explained. How is it possible you have this sudden emergence of so many crops, of so many cultivars around that time, and then nothing for the following thousands of years? It's almost as if that knowledge already came fully formed, as if people with very advanced, very sophisticated knowledge of agriculture, of crop domestication, of genetics as well, because in order to create many of these crop varieties, you had to interbreed different species. And then nothing. They left these as a legacy, basically, and then they vanished. This was something that was never repeated throughout the course of human history. It's a well-known fact that no more grains were domesticated after the time of the Neolithic Revolution, just around 10,000 years ago. And can it really be a coincidence that all of this happened just right after this great cataclysm of the Younger Dryas? It's almost as if this cataclysm wiped out an entire civilization. What we see coming out and emerging after the cataclysm is just a legacy, a sort of resurgence of civilization, something that already existed and was just coming back after the cataclysm.
And then we have another category that emerged at the same time, and we can put this right at Gobekli Tepe if you want evidence of it, but that is arts, right? Theater, sculpture, and that creative side also emerged at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. You have these incredible depictions on many of the pillars of Gobekli Tepe of animals, many abstract representations as well. So in a certain way, we can consider it as the beginning of a very sophisticated artistic form. And there is more, because again, thinking about just the complexity of Gobekli Tepe, this is a site that supposes a pretty advanced knowledge of mathematics, of astronomy, for the alignment of the site of the pillars. There are some of the ellipses of the enclosures of Gobekli Tepe. They incorporate Pythagorean triangles. They incorporate specific mathematical ratios. So this again suggests some very sophisticated people were at work. We're not talking about primitives. We're talking about a very sophisticated elite that came at that site. And again, going back to this idea that this might have been a technology transfer site, also taught some of these skills to the local, still mostly primitive population.
You know what? I think the best evidence is at Gobekli Tepe. The belt. The belt. Now, we're talking about primitive man, allegedly, but to have belt buckles, right? And I think there's a strong suggestion of metallurgy that wasn't supposed to exist for another 7,000, 8,000 years into the Bronze Age. But that is clearly there. They saw somebody elegantly dressed that had fashion sense. And I think this really needs to be brought into consideration.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. You have these H-shaped belts.
Hermes. They had Hermes belts at 12,000 BC.
Right. And that again prompts the question whether these also could have had a symbolic meaning. Now, mainstream archaeology would never call these symbols and representation hieroglyphs. But I think to a very large extent, that was a form of communication. There was a form of writing. These were symbols used to convey meaning. And to find that in such remote antiquity is really, really incredible. We're used to thinking that such complex forms of civilization as writing, as symbolic representation, they only emerged around 5,000 years ago in Egypt, in Sumer, and to find this evidence 7,000 years earlier at Gobekli Tepe really challenges the historical paradigm.
Now, are we going to have to start changing the dates in Egypt? Not only because of Atlantis, but because of the evidence that is presented there, where things could push back to the same period as Gobekli Tepe, 10,000 BC, 12,000 BC.
I do think so. And again, Robert Schoch has done some incredible work on the dating and the geology of the Sphinx, of the erosion. Much of the arguments that were brought forth by Egyptology to suggest that the Sphinx could not be that old had to do with the fact that no known civilization existed in Egypt at the time, or really anywhere else in the world. But now we have Gobekli Tepe, so we know that civilizations existed as far back as 11,000 years ago that possessed very sophisticated stoneworking techniques. They might have very well been able to sculpture something like the Sphinx. Now, this is not only a question about the age of the Sphinx, because the Giza complex is so interconnected that if you backdate the Sphinx to that remote time towards the end of the last ice age, then you're almost forced to also push back in time the dating, at least of the early stages of construction of the pyramids. And that involves an entirely different level of technology, an entirely different level of engineering skill, and even Gobekli Tepe, with the use of enormous blocks of stone, an exceptional ability to cut very hard stones such as granite, and then also prompts the question of the age of so many of these megalithic structures that you find in Egypt, not only at Giza, but the Osirian of Abydos, for instance, at a number of other sites throughout Egypt where you find evidence of very advanced stonework dating back to the time of the earliest dynasties.
Now, the consistency of the megalithic structures around the world, I'm talking about Peru, Bolivia, Central and South America, here in the United States, Australia, we could go around the world, would suggest that did Atlantis look this way? Did Atlantis look like pyramids? Did Atlantis look like obelisks? Did Atlantis have this architecture on it? Was that Atlantis? Is that what we're seeing represented around the world?
I think it did. In a way, if we're to believe the idea of these very advanced civilization that spread throughout the world and colonized all these different lands, it's very likely also exported their own kind of architecture. And so if we're to try to reconstruct how Atlantean architecture might have looked like, it would have been probably made up of very monumental structures, megalithic buildings of huge stones, very similar to the type of architecture that we find in Egypt, very geometric type of structure with a general lack of ornamentation or decoration, just very simple volumes of stone. This is the type of architecture that we find in Egypt with these very pristine volumes, like the pyramids, the megalithic temples, but also in Peru, if we look at the constructions of Cusco in Bolivia at Tiwanaku, you have these very refined, very sophisticated type of stonework that is at the same time monumental, but also very, very geometric. It has, I would say, almost an abstract nature, an abstract appearance to it, which I think was one of the characteristics of Atlantean architecture.
Yeah, and you see those same construction techniques repeated not only there in Bolivia and in Peru, but the same exact construction techniques in Egypt, but also something that we didn't discuss tonight is Greece. If I picture an Atlantean culture establishing itself and getting a foothold, we kind of have to look at Greece too as well, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Well, and in Greece and in Italy as well, you have these polygonal stonework. It is very similar to what you find in Peru as well. These are these massive walls built of interlocking stones that might date back thousands of years ago. They're actually pretty much older than the historical civilization of classical Greece and Rome that later settled in these lands. And going back to the question of the origin of this type of architecture, I actually think that this is a style of architecture we find both in the Old World, in Greece, in Italy, and in the New World, in South America particularly, that must have developed under conditions of very intense geological instability. If you look at all these type of structures, they tend to be like relatively low structures. You hardly find structures of more than 2 floors, more than 2 stories. They're all built of massive megalithic block of stone. Very often they're interlocking as if to give more strength and stability to this structure. It's almost as if to suggest these were meant to withstand even the strongest earthquakes. So this is a type of architecture was developed in a region, in an area, as I think was the mid-Atlantic Ocean at the time, that was subject to very intense telluric and volcanic forces that forced the development of this kind of architecture was then exported throughout the world. And this is the reason why then you find very similar styles of architecture and construction in places like Peru, in places like Italy, that are known to be very seismically active regions as well.
Yeah, and they've withstood all of those earthquakes and natural disasters and fires. But there's another point with Greece I wanted to, just like Egypt too, in a very strange way, but the foothold of philosophy and government and democracy and laws and theater and the arts and music and math and knowledge, very strong, very quick advances that seem to be very well established very early on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there are a number of different sources for Greek civilization. You have the Minoans in the Mediterranean that already create these magnificent palaces on the island of Crete, on Santorini. And I believe that in a way they must have been related, if not with Atlantis itself, at least with survivors from Atlantis. What this suggests is that Atlantean civilization did not just vanish overnight at the end of the last ice age, but it continued, although in a much more decayed form, well into the historical periods, possibly into the European Bronze Age. And many of these cultures that the ancient historians call the Pelasgians, for instance, that they identified as the builders of many of these megalithic monuments, the Minoans as well, they might have been the direct descendants of these late Atlantean or post-Atlantean cultures.
What a fantastic conversation tonight, Marco. Thank you for the book. It is amazing, The Empires of Atlantis. Are you going to write a follow-up book? What are you working on now?
I'm actually already working on a second book. It's going to be focused more on Mesoamerica. As right now, been living in Mexico for 5 years. I've been exploring a multitude of very fascinating sites that show megalithic architecture of a type that you do not typically find across Mesoamerica. They are not much known to the general public, but really suggest the possibility that an unknown megalithic culture might have existed in Mexico and Central America thousands of years ago, before the time of the Mayas and even before the time of the Olmecs. There was really, I believe, the true mother culture of the Americas, and they might have originated again from the mid-Atlantic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, my friend. Great conversation. I look forward to the next time you're on Fade to Black. Thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Great conversation. Marco Vigato, and it's all simple, marcovigato.com, and you can head over there for the book. We have the links up throughout social media and over on our website. Marco, have a great, safe 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll swing back right after this.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
This is Jimmy Church. Jason Martell's book, Knowledge Apocalypse 10-Year Anniversary Edition, is now available. Most ancient cultures speak of a time when their gods visited them. They never say their gods came from across the ocean or from the mountains. They always came down from the skies. Was ancient man visited by gods or extraterrestrials? We have not been told the full truth about our human past. There was a time when all the ancient cultures lived amongst beings they considered their gods. The search for truth leads us down the path of learning where the ETs might come from and why they are here. To understand some of these advanced topics and learn the truth about human origins, buy the new book from Jason Martell, Knowledge Apocalypse, now in its 10-year anniversary edition, available on Amazon.com by clicking on the banners over on our site, or simply visit JasonMartell.com. That's JasonMartell.com. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? ARX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNXDB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of fade to black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
This is Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Marco Vigato. MarcoVigato.com. The Empires of Atlantis. It's a great read. Highly recommend this book. A great conversation and so many things to talk about. And I've opened up the phone lines, 747-228-2051. And we'll see if we have some time to take some calls. I've got people on hold. You just stay right there. Okay, anyway. One of the things that not only this book represents, but the conversation tonight that frustrates me so much, not the book, but the conversation out there with skeptics and debunkers and those historians that don't want to step outside and think and wonder and ponder. It is so frustrating because one of their only argument to any of this is show us evidence, right? Show us evidence. We want to see evidence. And we pile it up. It's all out. It's right there. And the evidence is all over the place. And then after all of the conversations of Plato was just imagining things. No, stop, right? And Ed Fu, and you're interpreting things wrong. And no, this is a part of the historical record. And Plato wasn't the only one. He's the one that everybody talks about. He's not the only one. and I'm talking about from a historical perspective, from those that were there. There's that. But when we talk about a modern sense, where we are today, and something like, and we keep going back to the reason why Gobekli Tepe is mentioned so much, where we can, it exists. Gobekli Tepe is real. It wasn't supposed to exist. The argument up until 1995, when Gobekli Tepe was discovered, and the significance of Gobekli Tepe didn't happen for a few years after that, but 1995, so 2005, where suddenly Gobekli Tepe represented everything that historians would argue about and say, give us this, give us this, give us this. There's no conversation. Everything is at 3000 BC. There's no conversation before 3000 BC. And now there's Gobekli Tepe. That is the answer to everything. Every point that was brought up to debate this, and it has gone on in academia and in those circles for a very long time. I'm talking about hundreds of years. And here we are with Gobekli Tepe. And you look at Gobekli Tepe, and clearly that is not Stone Age man. That is not a primitive culture that doesn't have a grip on anything. Gobekli Tepe was created by a mind that understood things, that everything is now a paradox. All of it. The one point about Gobekli Tepe that I keep going back to, and it hasn't surfaced yet, but it's going to, is the possibility of metallurgy. To carve those rocks, those pillars, that art, that symbology that is at Gobekli Tepe, to quarry those megalithic stones and bring them there and tilt them upright suggests to me a knowledge of quarrying that not only to get the stones cut and into the T-pillar shapes, that's number one, suggests metallurgy to me, right? And that's not a conversation people want to have right now, because that really tips the scales. But then, this is the thing. The carvings at Gobekli Tepe are in relief. So what is relief? What do you mean by that, Jimmy? There's two ways to carve, right? The easy way, you carve into the stone, however you're going to pull that off. And that's difficult enough. To carve in relief, where it is now in 3D and is in relief, that's a whole nother step. That's a whole nother consideration. I'm thinking metallurgy. How could metal be used then? Unless it was introduced by another culture and brought in. And now, have these tools been revealed? No. Are there copper chisels? Are there iron? Bronze? No. Not yet. But that's not the only site where something like this has happened, though, that predates everything else. And this is the difficulty of Gobekli Tepe. And this is why nobody wants to challenge it, because they can't. They can't challenge it. You cannot say that Gobekli Tepe doesn't exist. You can't do that. It does exist. What we have to do is explain it. And they can't do that. It doesn't fit everything that has been taught, everything that has been taught to them, everything that continues to be taught in school today. It is the most incredible situation that we find ourselves in. Now, and now to let me stay on point here. If we go back to 1992, when Robert Schoch and John Anthony West in San Diego at the convention there. Here's the deal: the Geology Convention. They presented there, and the argument that was going back on both sides was that the geologists were saying, and the academics, look, you want to backdate the Sphinx to 10,000 BC. There is nothing on this planet that was built at 10,000 BC. So show us something before Giza at 3,000 BC, and we will sit and have a conversation about that. But that doesn't exist. That was 3 years before Klaus Schmidt's discovery of Gobekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey on the Syrian border. Robert Schoch didn't have that in 1992. That is what all of the academics begged for. Right? Now we have Gobekli Tepe. Now, if that would have happened in 1992, it's a whole other, that would have been a whole different press conference. That would have been a whole different, they tried to humiliate Robert Schoch and John Anthony West and the presentation of their findings. Now, Gobekli Tepe today, the more that we find out about Gobekli Tepe, the more fascinating it becomes, and the more that we now have to understand and accept that there was an advanced culture existing on planet Earth 12,000 BC. And that existing culture of high technology didn't just show up. The infrastructure, the logistics that has to be in place around Gobekli Tepe, of everything. My point being, you had to have agriculture. You had to have organized government. You had to have not only a way of clothing and sheltering and everything. The workers that were building Gobekli Tepe, and then you have the rest of the town, the village, that is there to support this. Now, one would say, and this is where they come back, no, that they didn't have any of that. There wasn't anything else there. It was just this little site of Gobekli Tepe. Now it turns out to be the opposite. Now we have 11 more tepes around Gobekli Tepe. The Gobekli Tepe site itself is layer upon layer upon layer of Gobekli Tepes. We don't know how old it is. We don't even know how far it goes back. And as we know that there are 24, 25, 26 stone circles that are there at Gobekli Tepe, and the ages of those are being discovered every single day. The dig continues. And are we going to push this back 12,000 BC, 13,000 BC, 14,000? It is beyond comprehension of what has been taught throughout history. And now the infrastructure that I just spoke about, the agriculture, the organization, you have to have an organized society to pull off the construction of a massive site like this. Now it turns out that there are 11 more. So yes, there had to have been, it wasn't something small. This wasn't a couple of dozen people. They had to have the engineers quarrying on the site. They have to move those, the pillars and the stones over to the site and then construct it, then to build, and then to treat them and create the artwork that is there too as well. Why is this important? Why am I bringing this up? I don't want to go back to the horrific Joe Rogan episode about the debate with Michael Shermer and Graham Hancock. That was unbelievably disrespectful. But if I would have been there instead of Graham, it would have been, or sitting next to Graham, I would have handled it completely different. And the most important point is this. You cannot do any of that without technology. None of it. It is an impossible situation. Gobekli Tepe wasn't some magical situation of a primitive culture that just decided to build something. That is not the case. And to suggest that there wasn't any knowledge of anything because you have math, you have geology, you have agriculture, you have art, and you have organization of that culture, all happening at the same time. That is what Gobekli Tepe represents. And you cannot say that we are misrepresenting and not understanding history and anthropology and archaeology. No, I think it's the exact opposite. You, those debunkers and those skeptics, are misrepresenting history. Now, the question is now, where do we go? Right? If that is the case, where did the knowledge come from? It didn't originate at Gobekli Tepe. Now, one would suggest, and I brought this up with Marco earlier in the conversation, did it come from the north? Did it come from the north? Did that knowledge migrate from the north and come south? There's a possibility of that, and there is some strong suggestions that that's a possibility. But it's also very close to Egypt. It's very close to Mesopotamia. It's very close to Iraq and the knowledge base that was there. So did it come from the south? Or, and this is where it gets crazy, did the knowledge that flooded into Mesopotamia and Egypt come from the north and Gobekli Tepe? Because Gobekli Tepe was first, right? It predates Giza, allegedly, right? So did all of this migrate south? It's a very interesting situation that we find ourselves in. To go back right now at this point and say, wait a minute, maybe we need to go back and look at what the ancients were talking about. Was there an Atlantis? Was there a civilization that predated everything that had a jump start on everything else, that understood things like astronomy and math and the arts and law and order and other things, crystals? I don't know. But it is the easiest answer that we have for all of this. It fits into the other conversations that are out there, and that includes the Bible. That includes the Sumerian text. That includes India. And again, and I brought this up, not only Central and South America, but Asia and China and Japan. I'm okay with this. And that's where Atlantis is today. To hear Robert Schoch talk about his frustration about bringing up the A word in academia, that you just can't do it. You cannot bring up Atlantis. That was then. Today we understand a lot more, and we know what it's like to be taught. You have teachers, and there isn't anything original. Everything is taught, and it goes back, and it goes back, and it goes back, and it goes back. And that's why Gobekli Tepe is so important, and there is many more. What are we going to do? And I don't know when, and I hope it happens while I'm still on this planet. What are we going to do when something surfaces in Antarctica? What are we going to do if something surfaces here in North America or in Canada? Some 50,000-year-old site, something that we find in Northern Europe, maybe Africa, right? What are we going to do when that happens? Because, and I hope that we do something, because Gobekli Tepe, which I keep saying that should have been headline news on every media outlet, the biggest news of all time. Nothing happened with Gobekli Tepe. And it's what the geologists wanted in 1992. And it happened, and silence and crickets. What's going to happen if something else surfaces? Something incredible, something that would suggest 50,000 years, 40,000 years, when absolutely nothing was supposed to be around. And that's where we are today. And that's why Marco's book is so important. I would ask anybody to get it. It is called Empires of Atlantis. It is a fantastic read. All right. I've got time for maybe one or two phone calls. So let's grab one right now. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
This is Paula Huxley.
Hi, Paula. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am fantastic. Great show tonight.
Okay. It was. And I have to chime in on what you just were talking about.
What's that?
About the megalithic structures and, whatnots all over the world. I just want to say that I think in 1984, I had a theory that every continent was influenced by an outside source, let's say. The people in Ireland have red hair, and there are red giants. There are some monkeys that have slanted eyes in Asia. I could go on and on. So is it kind of did each race have a place to do their own genetic DNA tampering?
Right. Right. Right.
So I've always had that little bird's eye view of, there's slanted eyes on monkeys in Japan. So.
Well,
and when you put the continents together, and I remember being a child and looking at the history books and going, sure looks like they were all together at one point.
Yes, and that is one of the most interesting, because we talk about like the Bering Strait, right, and Alaska and the land bridge that went across, or land bridge in between Australia and up into Asia.
There was no bridge; they were all together.
They were all together.
Maybe it all faded quick,
right,
slowly through time.
Right. They weren't island hopping.
My concept, with North America and whatnot, all the way down to Peru, they're all similar in feature, and did, at some point they migrate down or did they come up, but if you ask me, Mexico, they're all descendants of Peru, or, there was the Mayan culture there, and they all have megalithic structures. So every, whatever you want to call them, has some kind of megalithic crap in the background as well.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it exists everywhere. It doesn't matter if you just brought up Ireland, right, or northern United Kingdom.
And the giants and the red-haired, that we all came from something, some folklore.
Now, is it that I've just got a minute left, but I want to ask you this: when you look at the pyramids in Mexico City, or you look at the pyramids in Belize, or you head down to
on every continent,
right?
That's another bird's eye view. From 84.
How is it that every culture around the world had the exact same idea? Right? How is it that they
I've got some theories on this pyramid crap, and they're underwater. They're it's a part of our heritage, I guess, somehow, on every level. Maybe, I don't know.
Or
and I have a theory, so I'm not going to go deeper. We're out of time.
Okay. But maybe, just maybe, Paula, somebody was just spreading that knowledge around the world. Maybe it's as simple as that.
Let's just say if man was man and whatever, and, if you go back to what was in the library in 1984, it was the pyramids were built to communicate with the dead. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, is that a path to death or the people? Right? And if this is on every continent as illustrated as a hey, this is your past kind of thing to blah, blah, blah. And no one gets it.
That's a great point. Paula, behave and be well.
Okay, see you Saturday.
You're coming out.
I don't know. My husband doesn't know yet, but I am.
All right. I'll see you there.
Okay, bye.
Have a great night, Paula. Thank you for the phone call. She's coming out to the Conscious Life Expo. And this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But I'll be there the 4th through the 7th at the LAX Hilton right here in Los Angeles, California. And I can't wait to go and hang out with all of you. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Another great show tonight. I want to thank Marco Vigato. What an amazing conversation. And the book, The Empires of Atlantis, it's available right there. You can go to marcovigato.com. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmasters, Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Fader night, not Thursday. It is tomorrow. It's open lines all night long. So I'll see everybody tomorrow. Until then, I want you to be safe. It's time to fade to black.